Your audio is on. Just
check, 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 check.
Microphone good.
Wait.
I think my microphone's good. Hi, Sue. Look, I'm already being blamed that we're late. Ahmed already blamed me. I'm just waiting for Jake to pick up the camera. They have audio. We're just waiting for video.
Are we on?
We're on, yeah, audio-wise, but
we're lucky to even be here. Holy smokes! Who's out here?
Volume's on the top and on the side, Megan.
Come on in. Come on in.
Oh, yeah, make sure your phones are all muted.
Jim, please make sure your phones are muted. Who's reading questions?
I am.
Okay, read them a little more thoroughly. You know what I mean by that? Don't skip over ones.
Well, we get a lot.
Ken, you need to have your face on. You need to be on there looking at that because you know more on the wood side of it, so you know what kind of question, which questions need to be addressed. What? Yeah, I'm ready. I was born ready. How's my hair? You never tell me.
It's too late because you're already on.
Good to go?
Yep.
Hi, folks. Welcome. Oh, this is May the 4th. Can't help but smile when you hear that. Say that. May the 4th be with you. Duh. Welcome, folks. This is our live YouTube broadcast number 7?
7, yeah.
Number 7, wow. So we started last week. Last week was the first. I didn't know we were going to take 2 to do it on workbenches, and we spent the whole time mostly talking about the construction of this one. Today we're going to finish with the People's Bench. Jake named that. But before we do that, there's a couple of things that I want to tell you. And do we have anybody out there, Frick?
Yeah, we have. My count's always
3?
off. Mine's saying 81, but it's usually low.
95. So let me just tell you briefly why we do this. 3 years ago, Jake and I started a program called the Purple Heart Project. It was a result of Jesse Paredes contacting me out of the blue, looking for a dovetail saw, and mentioned that he thinks my saw was the best. Thank you, Jess. And wanted to know if we ever had any with cosmetic flaws because he couldn't afford a new one. But if we had any that we sold at less expensive, he would save his money and get it. And then he went on to say that he was a combat wounded Marine, lived on a small disability pension in the government. But he said, ever since he got involved in hand tool woodworking, it was the first time that he found any peace from the physical and the mental pain that he suffers from. And that hit me because I had been accustomed to teaching 50-year-old business executives in these week-long hand tool courses that we taught. And you'd see them come in Monday, tight as a drum from stress. And then during the week, you'd watch this balloon deflate. And come Friday, they were like jellyfish, and they didn't want to go home. I'd be kicking them out at midnight. Go! I got to catch a flight to go home. So I thought maybe there's something we should be doing for these guys. So we reached out and we helped Jesse. That's where I met Luther, who's become an integral part of what we do. And we are 2 days away, or a day and a half away, from starting number 10 class. We've had 60 combat wounded vets to date come to our workshops. We cover all their expenses, including sending them home with, in Canadian, about $3,000 worth of tools so that they can continue to do this at home. And we have done this in Niagara Falls right up until now. We have a new shop. We have a new classroom. I'm going to take you there and let you see it. And this will be our first class where we're teaching them right here. We're going and picking them up at Bangor International Airport tomorrow. 3 are flying in to Fredericton. And one of our civilian students who's volunteered to bring them down. So we're all going to meet here tomorrow night at 9 o'clock for a... What are we here for, Frick?
Barbecue?
What do we call it?
I don't know.
What's on the sign?
Oh, the frickin' good barbecue.
We're having shish kebabs. I'm excited about that because I can actually eat it. So what we do in these live broadcasts, we got together and we thought, we're putting out all this free content. Why don't we give it a purpose? So the purpose is to raise money for our Purple Heart Project. We don't take a salary out of this. We don't take any kind of administrative fees. Luther comes in. We fly him in. We take care of them over here Super Dave over there works with us, part of their team. And everything that we raise is used to either buy plane tickets for the vets, pay for their hotel, their food, or cover their tool costs. What we don't raise, we pay ourselves, and make no bones about it. Please do not donate through YouTube. They take 32 or 30 some
35.
35%. That's just way too much. So if you want to donate, tell us. We'd love to give you a shout out. And please don't be embarrassed by that. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So, you know, people are inspired when they see other people step up to the plate and do something. Well, nice.
I'll post the link.
Post the link. Do it right through our website, RobCosman.com. There's a right up there in the toolbar, top left, Purple Heart Project, on the drop-down menu, how you can help. And we'd be grateful to have your help, but be even more grateful to help you find us some of these guys who need this help. This is our single biggest problem, is locating these guys who are suffering in silence and don't know where to turn. We have a solution. Maybe not be for everybody, but flash over there to Super Dave. But we have helped several, and Dave's a great example of guys who need it, who deserve it, more than deserve it, and it actually works. So the other thing you can do is you can buy one of our T-shirts. This nice Purple Heart logo on the front. Wood is good on the back. Wear it proudly, promote it, and help us spread the word. Now, before we start on the bench, come on here. I want to show you what we've got. We are essentially ready. There's a few minor little things. We've been busting our butts. Just kind of pan around here so we see some of these people. So Bride just flew in. He's early for the class starting on Monday, so we've already got him put to work.
He's not allowed to take a break like everyone else.
No, that's right, because he came late. We got Jim, who arrived 2 days ago. We worked his butt off all day yesterday, and he's not going home yet. Right behind him is Paul. Now, Paul's an interesting character because Paul is a lieutenant commander, said that right, in the Canadian Navy, and he contacted me out of the blue 3 weeks ago. 3 or 4 weeks ago, and said, Rob, I like what you're doing. Can I help? Well, it just so happens that Luther, who's under higher orders, is in Africa, gallivanting around the continent, not here helping us. And I said, you know what, Paul? We are down a man. We need you. I need you for 2 weeks. So we got head honchos, gave him the time off, and he arrived a couple hours ago.
Luther did say that it would take 2 lieutenant commanders to replace our current. Pretty thick.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. And then we got Super Dave in the back. Super Dave, 17 years, Army, Navy, medically retired. Dave came to our class. Was one of our Purple Heart. What do we call them? Scholarship recipients in the fall of 2017. And his is a great story. He ended up contacting us the next spring. Another time that Luther was off gallivanting, we were down a man. And Dave just happened to call 3 or 4 days before and said, you know, my wife says I should call you, see if I can help. And I said, absolutely. So Dave came up.
He wasn't our most handsome option. But he was our most available.
Dave didn't live that far away, so he came up. There's a funny story attached to this. Anyway, he came up, and he and Jake worked together, and he was so good. And I'm going to embarrass him. He was so good. We didn't need him the second week because Luther was actually coming in on Sunday. But I went to him and said, Dave, it's been so fantastic having you here. Would you come back next week? So he did. And now we just said, well, okay, now you're part of the team. So wherever we go, wherever we do a wood show, anywhere, we fly him in and he works with us. So when he first came, he didn't know we were going to take care of him. So he loaded up. He had the back of his vehicle so he could sleep in it, and he had a cooler full of peanut butter and jam and bread, so he could feed himself for weeks. I felt terrible when I heard this, but I also thought it was funny too. But no, we take care of him. So we bring him in.
Now that we know he'll do that, we tell him to.
Yeah.
His wife's on here, so be careful what you say.
Is she on there?
Yeah.
Michelle?
Michelle's here.
Hi, Michelle. Zoom right in and give him a big wet kiss.
She probably thinks this is close enough.
Yeah. She keeps suggesting we keep him longer. Anytime I talk to her. And then we have Megan right here in front. Integral part of the team. Married to Jake. Over here we have Ken. Ken Anthony. Ken works with us. Great employee. He's here Saturday night. He has no He has no life, obviously, because this is where he hangs out. But Bry right behind him, who we already told you is a student coming in, and then of course we have Frick on the. But I want to say a special hello. So Angela Anthony is a cousin to Ken, who happens to like woodworking, and she wrote me a letter. Thank you very much, Angela. And her goal is to come and work here in the shop with us. She's under the weather right now, but when she gets better, she's coming here. So that you'll be prepared and ready, I'm going to send these home with Ken for you. This one's on sharpening and using your hand plane. Sorry, that one is. And this one's on dovetail. So I'm giving this to Ken, expecting he'll deliver it for you. You'll probably watch it before he does, but all right. Thanks, Angela. Hope you're feeling better. Now, let's go out here. Come on, we'll show you what we did. We've been busting our butt. We left here last night at 1:30. I don't know how late it was the night before, but we've been here several nights. So this is the class essentially ready. How far in can you come? They got my bench a little bit out of position. So all the drop-down plugs are in place for bench lamps. There's one missing off of here. We got the extra benches done that we needed. We're going to talk about these tonight. We've got our monitor on the wall with our overhead camera over here. The overhead camera is focusing over there on my Vise, so everyone will have a good view, and if we need to, we'll put another camera over there. Oh, I want to show you these. So we had to make, we have these Bose speakers for in here. Can you get that far? So anyway, I decided to do something a little bit fancy. So we made these little speaker stands. This one is a through houndstooth dovetail. And then over in this corner, which is even more difficult, is a half-blind houndstooth dovetail. You able to see that? Can you get that far enough over?
TV's in the way.
Oh, it's too bad. That one's really cool. That was a lot of fun. Our bathroom is 90% done. We just got to put the ceiling in it. Our sliding doors are on. What else? We're ready. If you're watching and you're showing up next week, we're ready. Okay, come on back. Come on back. That was Luther's famous joke.
Paul says that the guitar's on the way. So
Thank you, Paul. We're going to figure out how we're going to get that across. So I got to tell you about this. But where's Paul's T-shirt? Paul Rigney is from Tennessee, and and Paul, and we're supposed to have a Pittsburgh Buffalo Sabres jersey here too. Paul Rigney is a woodworker, craftsman, instrument maker down in Knoxville, Tennessee area. And I met him at the Knoxville Woodcraft store, which is run by Everett, who is a fantastic individual and one of the biggest supporters. Anyway, so Paul and George. Well, George is coming up. George is Everett's manager. He's going to be here for next week's class. So Paul made a guitar. I wish I knew enough about guitars to tell you all about it, but it's pretty cool. And he's donating. It's up for auction. We'll have it here to show, and all the proceeds are going to the Purple Heart Project. Paul's a vet as well. I met a bunch of them when I was down there. In fact, I think I have a YouTube of that. We'll put that on there so you can find it. Thank you, Paul. All right, fire the questions as we get them.
Someone asked if we were going to live stream any of the class.
Yeah, we are. We're gonna live stream some. We may do two. We'll do each class. Towards the latter part of the week when everybody's comfortable, we'll definitely do that. Give them a chance to say hello. Okay, we ready? Am I going to switch to bench mode? So I want to give you a little bit of history on this. When Jake and I and Frick and Dave started the online hand tool workshop in the summer of 2011.
Yep, July 2011.
2011. Come January, I realized that these guys were home trying to do this on the end of a table saw or a workmate. They didn't have a bench. And I thought, how can you do this stuff without a good solid bench to work on? Well, as we went over this last week, building this bench without a full kit of tools is almost impossible. To try to do this with nothing but hand tools. So I went to work trying to come up with some kind of a bench that could be built with minimal tools at minimum cost and actually be an effective bench. Now, the first idea was that what we would do is have an assembly bench or assembly table so that you weren't gluing stuff up on your good bench. So use the assembly table to build your bench and then just have it end up being your assembly bench. Simple as that. The top was made out of 3 inches of MDF. Now, MDF is not my favorite product by any stretch of the imagination. I can't stand the smell of it. I think it's terrible. And but in certain applications, it's actually an exceptional product. Its bonuses are that it has a tough, hard-wearing surface. It's dimensionally stable. It stays flat. And as long as you don't get it wet, it lasts a long time. So and it's inexpensive. Yeah, I mean, I think it's $30, $40 for the sheet. So we ended up making the top out of MDF. We did the base out of plywood, and the way we built it required very few tools. Clamps, if you look around at how many clamps I have, I can't even begin to tell you the value of the clamps on the 2 sides of this clamp tray. It's jam-packed on both sides. Thousands of dollars worth of clamps. I've got pipe clamps there. I've got 4 or 5 racks of pipe clamps back there, and it's incredible how expensive they are, and you can never have enough. So to try to build something like this and actually have clamps to put it together was going to be impossible too. So we worked around all of that. We ended up coming up with something that worked so well that we thought, wow, wonder if we could convert this into an actual bench. And that's when we added a Shoberg bench to the end of it, drilled some holes for bench dogs, and the next thing you know, we had this bench that I've often told people, I said, if I was going to do it again, I don't think I would have built this. I think I just would have built one of these. This has to be flattened on occasionally, maybe every 4 or 5 years. This doesn't. And if you destroy the top on this, you're out $30. You're going to make another one. In fact, I think it could be built in such a way that you could just simply flip it over and use the other side. What, Frick?
All right, little break for questions here. First of all, Sue has a Trend diamond plate and a Shapton stone that she's going to donate.
Well, thank you,
to
Sue.
to the Purple Heart Project, so it should be hopefully there in time for our class.
Perfect. Thank you.
Joseph
Mensch?
Yep, he donated another $250, and again, he wants to give away 12 T-shirts to vets in the chat room. So if there are any vets,
Okay, so we got to make sure we get this right this time.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you who Joseph Mensch is. Joseph, and I got to say this because he's such a generous individual, and he's so behind what we do. I met Joseph because way back in 2013 or 14, I had a really nice bench that I used to travel with, and I didn't need the second bench. And I thought one day I should fix that up and sell it. So I really fixed it up. I put walnut burl on it, and it was gorgeous. And one night we were just getting ready to film. Frick, were you filming it?
I think so, yeah.
I think. And we said, let's spend a couple minutes and show them what I'm doing. So we showed this bench, showed
Oh,
some
wait.
features.
Wait,
What's the matter?
battery problem again.
For who?
You.
You mean I need to stop talking?
Yeah, just a second.
What do you need?
2 AA's. Ken's on it, don't worry.
Oh, look at that. Ken, did you do that?
Yeah, I warned him because the light was blinking.
But I don't know if these are charged.
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
This is what happens when you go live. Do we have anybody out there in YouTube?
I'm showing 213, I don't know. 218.
Got to beat last week's record.
All right, there we go. Continue.
Okay. So anyway, Frick did a quick flyby and showed some of the things, and then he ended up putting it on YouTube. Well, I got an email from some guy a few days later, and he said, "Rob, how much do you want for that bench?" And I didn't think people were going to take it for what I was asking, but told him, and he said, "Well, I'd like to have it." And it ended up being Joseph. So he was quite a bit taller than I am, so we had to go in and modify the bench, add the height, and we shipped it out to him. He lived happily ever after. So I've met him. We've had dinner together out in Seattle when I've been out there. And he just is constantly donating to our cause. So he sent me I was complaining one time online when we were filming because this right angle drill I had wouldn't hold a charge. Next thing you know, there's a brand new Milwaukee in the mail from him. He had these done for us, the Purple Heart project thing. I've got one in the other room. And what else were you saying? Oh, okay. So anyway, so he's just been a big supporter of the military and of what we're trying to do for the vets. So
let's have them email.
Okay, well now we have to explain. So Joseph is going to donate 12 Purple Heart T-shirts to any combat wounded or any vet.
Any vet in the chat.
Any vets online tonight. So please let him do this for you. Sometimes you have to be the reason why somebody else gets to feel good about reaching out and helping. Remember that. So just tell us who you are.
If they don't want to speak up, they can email.
Yeah, you can just email, and then we'll get your contact information, and we'll send it to you. Compliments of Joseph Mensch.
Do you want to tell them where they can email?
Yeah, if they who should get it? Jake? Yep. So Jake at RobCosman.com.
Okay. Is that any other?
Yes. Okay. So is there any way to waterproof MDF? Is a question.
If you find out, let me know.
And Anthony asks, Tony asks Rob, if the top of the bench gets screwed up over time, can you replace the upper piece or glue another piece onto it?
All right, so let's address that for a second. First of all, we saturate these with several coats. I used to do oil, but it takes too long to dry in between, so now I use lacquer. But if you put water on this, it's going to work its way through and it's going to swell up. Now, I actually, in repairing some of the benches we had, I had to go in and I planed it off, the bump, because it didn't go back down and it had been there a long time. Planed it off. But then as soon as you get past this tough exterior, you get into a much softer core, which is the downside of MDF. But what I did, I took some water-thin cyanacrylate, so that's what it is, several different brands, and I simply saturated the area where I had planed, let it soak in, and then just wiped it off. And when that dries, it's nice and hard. Wood turners use it all the time. If they're turning a bowl and they got into some punky wood, which is partially starting to rot, you can go in there with cyanacrylate and it'll stiffen it all up and make it nice and hard. So I actually will go in here and do that top section with MDF, or with cyanacrylate, and that'll stiffen that up and make it much more durable. So your repairs, once again, you get a bump or you get a bad scar, flush it off, put some cyanacrylate on there, let it soak in, wipe it off, and then you're back to being good. But I don't know how to prevent water from getting through that top layer. I just tell everyone, I said, you cannot let this get wet. And that's kind of dangerous because on this end, we actually have our sharpening station. So, however, having said that, with some of those benches out there, we've had for how long? 4 years. So they've been through 8 or 9, maybe even 10 week-long classes, and they're still going strong. So I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse, but I want to answer the question since it was asked. Jake and I made the mistake of drilling these holes on a 3-degree angle. If you don't have your bench dog holes on a bit of a slope, so these ones have to go on that angle, and this one has to go in the opposite angle. If you have them simply straight up and down, as soon as you start to wind in your bench, the bench dogs are going to splay back like that, and what's going to happen to your board? Your board's going to pop up. So your bench dogs always are canted towards each other slightly. So it's a bit of a pain to go in there, and because you have to drill on that 3-degree angle. And then Jake said to me one day, he said, Dad, did you notice the face of these bench dogs are canted? So it's already built into it. So if I was doing this again, if you were to bore these dog holes straight down, perpendicular to the face, that problem is compensated for here. And when this gets beat up, you can simply take it, flip it around, and use the other side. Now, you've got some holes underneath where you bolted in the vise, but that would be easy enough to fix. If I had a hole in there, you simply bore a hole a little bit bigger, put in a dowel, flush it off, and you've got a nice flat surface. It may not be the prettiest, but it's still usable. Or go out and buy another sheet of MDF and redo it. You're out $30.
Have you heard of a type of MDF called Xtera?
Well, interesting that you should ask. This is the first time that we used, the MDF now has 2 different grades, the regular, and what was the name of the stuff that we have? Can't remember. No. It's the premium stuff. It's probably 20% more. And what they've done is they've come up, somehow they've made it so that when you, they did it for the cabinet door industry because they use MDF a lot on painted cabinet doors. So you're going in and routing the edge and then finishing off the door. Well, if you do that on regular MDF, that edge will soak material in 10 times more than this surface. So you've got to go in and soak until you finally saturate it to where it'll look like this when it's done. And this new stuff, Ranger Board, it's called Ranger Board, which I'm sure is just a brand. And that stuff is designed specifically so it won't have that problem. Can't really tell you that we noticed a whole lot of difference doing it, but so yes, I assume that's the same thing. It's a little bit denser. Oh, he told us it's all pine fiber, whereas normal MDF is mixed wood fiber. They use all pine fiber in making Ranger Board. So I haven't dug into it to find out how that makes a difference, but that's what I do remember him telling me. Anything else? I haven't even introduced I haven't even started the whole process yet. Quick, or else I'm going to.
We had another donation from David Ducharme, $100.
David, thank you. David is one of our class members from
Now Pennsylvania.
2 classes ago from Pennsylvania. Yeah, thank you, David. David's Air Force, former vet, or former vet. Once you're out of the military, now you're a vet, right? Yes, team. Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
How
Thanks, Dave.
how heavy is that bench? Or will
Somebody
you-
asking that question?
yeah, will you get to that?
Ugh. Yeah, Dave, you've moved this enough. What's your guess?
Maybe 250 at least.
Yeah, with that base on it and the vise.
255 point.
Yeah, it's over 200, and I would be willing to bet that it's probably in the range of. I don't think it would be 250, but I'll bet you it's closer to 250 than it is to 200. And I'm just saying that to be obstinate. Actually, there's another vise sitting on there too, but yeah, heavy. When the wheels are down. Anybody in the Air Force? No. That might you react to that. When the wheels are down and you're planing, you're not okay, so I'm going to be serious here. So I got to put a fair bit of work in that to push that. So when the wheels are down and you're planing, this is not going to move around your floor. Actually, I was worried about that because that floor treatment we have is kind of slick, and I don't know what it's going to be like when we actually start planing. We may have to end up putting some rubber underneath them, but it is heavy. It is definitely heavy. Okay, anything else?
Well, Kyle is asking.
Kyle who?
Kyle. Well, it's just Kyle Hiller's workshop is his username.
Hi,
So
Kyle.
his name is Kyle Hiller. Obviously, he just wants to know how much it costs and what is the bench vise. But
We're gonna cover all that, but I'll just tell you quickly. The bench itself, the top and the base, you can do for under $100. The vise is $250. I'll tell you about that because it's the best commercially available bench vise that you can find. It does not include the jaw. So, can somebody with math? Any mathematician? I throw these numbers out at you. You ready? So $100 for the MDF and the plywood. The bench dogs are $25 a piece, so that's an extra $50. The bench vise is $250, includes the handle. The jaw on here, that piece of mate, you could probably do that for another $20. The sharpening station wouldn't have more than $5 in material. The tray underneath, probably $10 worth of plywood. If you're talking about the mobile base, I think they're $70. The finish that we have on it, you might have $15 in finish. Bench lamp, another $20. Bolts, how much on the bolts? $6? $6 for the bolts and the legs that hold it to the bottom. You got staples. That's how it's held together, and glue. Say you spend another $10 on staples and glue. I don't think I'm missing anything. Dave? $556. I wouldn't sell it to you for that, but if you made your own, that you'd probably be Canadian, American.
That's American math.
It's American math.
Yeah, but are you talking American prices or Canadian?
I would say
That's probably American. That's about
American. American. Okay, can I go?
Yep. Someone wanted to know where the bench lamps are from, but I said they're from IKEA, right? These ones specifically?
Yeah. We're going to start carrying them because not everybody has access to them. We're going to start carrying them just because they're a great bench lamp. I'll talk about that too. Okay, so mostly what I do is handwork. I do use power tools, but my bench is mostly handwork. So the bench had to be stable. It had to be heavy. It had to be flat. This is your reference surface. So everything you build at some point is going to touch this, and the outcome is going to be determined by how flat this is. We had to have good bench dogs. You had to be able to securely hold things. You had to be able to cut dovetails, and you want to have your work securely held in place. You got to be able to see. Needs a good light. And if you're in a garage, you've got to be able to move this back and forth, so the mobility factor is a big issue. So let's start with the base. The base is held, there's a mortise and tenon. So this leg is mortised into this foot and something similar up at the top. If you're new at this and you're trying to do that in solid wood, that's almost going to be impossible. For the simple reason that it's a lot bigger than you normally would work. You're going to need bigger tools. It's a lot of heavy lifting, and I don't mean that's just in the literal sense, but you're cutting a big joint. Now the other problem was the shortage of tools. The average guy who's getting started doesn't have all. I mean, you scan around my shop, I have every tool that you can imagine. I have multiples of them. I mean, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's one you can't see. I have 6 bandsaws. Who needs 6 bandsaws? Obviously we do. And drill presses, there's probably 18 drill presses in here. You don't have all that stuff. So what are you going to do and how are you going to build it? So we took all that into account. So let's start with the base. The base we made out of Baltic birch. Now, the first one I didn't use Baltic birch. I used regular plywood. Regular plywood, the interior core is really crap and not very good at all, and you don't want to see it on the edge. But if you spend a little more money and you buy what's called Baltic birch, often called Russian birch, the nice thing about it is all of the plies are the same thickness, and they're all the same wood. They're birch. So if you have any voids at all, there are very few. When this is all glued together, this is like having almost a 3-inch thick piece of plywood, and it is super strong. So if I can grab some pieces over here, I'll show you how we did it. The nice thing about a glued surface is once the glue has dried, it's stronger than the wood itself, which simply means that it becomes 2 pieces become literally 1 piece. Ken, cut that into 3 pieces for me, please. 3 equal-sized pieces. Actually 4, if you can. Pardon the noise for a second. So I start by taking my 4x8 sheet. Now this stuff comes in 5x5, but you can also find it in 4x8. The 5x5, unfortunately, is more common, but you really want it in 4x8. And we rip it into 3 7/8 inch wide pieces. You can't get 4-inch pieces or you're going to get left with some waste at the end. So you can use a table saw, you can use a skill saw, whatever. We actually just produced a video where it's half done. It's not finished yet. Hold on a second. We're doing a video on how to build this, and it's all step by step, and it'll be about 3. How long is it going to be, Frick? 3 hours?
I would say it'd be between 3 and 4 hours, yes.
3 and 4 hours. But it'll give you everything you need to know. I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights right now. I'm just waiting for Ken to make that next cut so we won't get interrupted. No, it doesn't have to be perfect, Tim. Just eyeball it. Yeah, I just need the pieces just for...
Type on 3 glue.
Pardon?
Tight Bond 3 glue. Is that what you use? Tight Bond 3?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. Thank you. So the way we did this is you had your foot was on the bottom. So this piece down here. Okay, there's your first piece. Then you have an upright. Then your next piece is going to sit like this, if you can imagine this piece going all the way. Now what you're doing is you're gluing these pieces all together as you build it, but because you don't have 1,000 clamps, you go out and you buy an inexpensive staple gun. So this is called a 1/4 inch crown staple gun. That means that this staple is the crown is 1/4 inch wide. I don't know what gauge this is. I'll tell you in a second. It's written on the side. 18 gauge. And I don't know how much that matters, and you want it so that it doesn't pass all the way through two pieces. So this stuff is considered 5/8. It's a little bit less than 5/8, but when I staple that, it doesn't go all the way through. So as you glue the entire surface, and then when you put that on there, you staple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then once the glue sets, then you no longer need the strength of the staple, but it stays there obviously, and now you've got two pieces becoming one. So this would all be glued, and then you would put your little piece out here, and then you would put your next piece in here that would go in between the next upright, and then you would put another upright in here. So now you've got two lengths, and you'd put another piece here and another piece here, and then the next piece would go all the way across. So what you would have done is you would have created this mortise, hole, and you would have created a tenon, and it would have looked like, the tenon would have looked like this on the other piece, right? Because the way it was built, and it fit right in there, but it's all being done at the same time. So when you're done, you have this trestle right here that is solid as a rock. Now, a couple little tips. I keep all of my staples on the outside, so when I have to come in and drill holes like this, or up here, I'm not having to drill through staples. Didn't remember that. Didn't think about that the first time we did this. And if you're careful, you can keep these fairly close, but there's always going to be a little bit of creeping. However, it's not hard to flush that off, and we cover all of that and showing you how to do that on the video. So you end up making two of these. Obviously one here, one down there. The stretchers in between are just three pieces glued together. And then you end up drilling a hole through here, and you drill a hole, if you can look up underneath here, Jake. I drill an access hole right here. The hole with the bolt comes all the way through, and that allows you to get in there and put a nut on there and tighten it up. And when it's tightened up, it's nice and solid, it doesn't move. So that's essentially how your base goes together. It's not hard at all. We crank out quite a few of these, but you want this to be deep enough that there's enough surface area here so that with this stretcher and this stretcher, this thing is not going to rack at all. You can't move that side to side. And you'll also notice on the feet, do you see how I've recessed the underside right here so that you're only sitting on this pad and one on the other side? If you didn't do that, you've got that big, long, flat piece, and then on a garage floor, it's probably going to rock, and you're having to shim it. It's a lot easier to get it to stay nice and flat if you've got four pads that the whole bench is resting on. And if you had to shim one, it's not a big deal. Easy to do.
Trey.
Hi? Yeah, any questions on this yet?
A couple of people asking when the video's coming up, but I'm explaining that now.
Okay.
We've only filmed the first half, so.
Any questions on building the base, the sub-assembly, the base assembly?
The base, no.
No? Okay. All right. Now, this is critical because the other problem you're going to run into is when it comes time to gluing up the top, how are you going to glue it so it's nice and flat, and how are you going to glue it, period? So I go ahead and I assemble the base. I got a lot to talk about.
You're at 40 minutes already.
So here's the base all put together. Now, hopefully you have a table saw. If you don't have a table saw, it's going to be a little more difficult. But with my table saw, I put the bottom side of this against the fence, and I rip the opposite side so that this and the base and the bottom of the trestle are parallel. And I do the same thing with this piece. So before I assemble this trestle and this trestle have parallel surfaces on the bottom and on the top, and they are the same height. Okay? Now when I put this together, and one of the little tips that we learned is if you're using a 3/8 inch bolt, you don't drill a 3/8 inch hole. Because trying to get a 3/8 inch bolt through that 3/8 inch hole is you beat it to death. So we actually stepped it up. What did we use, 10 mil? We got a metric drill, a 10 millimeter drill, which is just a little bit oversized, makes it so much easier. It also gives you just a little bit of leeway because you want that to be flush. You want that to be flush, this, and this. What you want to do is you want to create a flat surface up here that you're actually going to use to assemble your top. Now, I've noticed that one's not flush right now, but what I can do is I can take my mallet, and there should be enough play in that. Yeah, there is. That's your mic
Yeah.
that everybody requested, so that the audience asking questions can be heard.
Yeah.
You're a quiet bunch tonight. So once I flush this up, get all of them flush, then I want to sight down this thing. So I would get somewhere, and I'd use it like a pair of winding sticks, and I would sight down those two top edges, and you'd be surprised at how accurate you can get by doing that. And if that's not enough for you, you can use a pair of winding sticks. I'll dig them out and show you exactly what I mean. Winding sticks are nothing more than two parallel pieces of wood that are used to exaggerate any wind or twist because they just lengthen the reference surface. So you'd set a pair there, or one there, and one there, and then you would sight down, and using those white corners, you can eyeball that, and it'll tell you if these are parallel. Can you get down there, Jake, and check that out? Do you want me to give you a dark background? Hold on. Can you see it? Okay. So I can tell you right now that that's probably, these two edges are probably parallel to within a thousandth of an inch. That's how accurate you can get by eye using a pair of winding sticks. So now that this is a nice flat surface, Ken, or Dave, would you grab one of those pieces? So I took my sheet of MDF. Now I've got to be able to get 3 pieces out of one sheet of MDF. My bench is 60, these benches are 60 inches long. Most people don't have the room for anything bigger than that. So I take that sheet, and the first thing we do, and you can do this again with a circular saw or a table saw, we cut the end. How much do we cut off the end? Well, it's 96 inches long, and 97 actually. MDF always comes an inch longer, an inch wider. So if we had a 97-inch piece, we cut a 60, which left us approximately a 37-inch piece. So the first cut we made was we cut a 37-inch wide piece off of the end. So now we've got a piece that is 37 inches wide by 4 feet or 49 inches long. And then we take what's left and we rip it into 2 20-inch pieces. So this piece is 20 inches by 60, and the next one's 20 inches by 60. Dave, you want to bring me the 2 short ones? Then we take that piece, the first piece we cut off, which is 48 by 36, and we cut it into 2 pieces that are, 36 by 20, and then we cut them down to being 30 by 20. So when we're gluing this up, we're going to glue these 2 together, and then our final piece, which is full length, is going to go in the top. Now you're sandwiching this, but when it's all glued together, you've got compression and tension. It's going to stay nice and flat. Thank you, Vanna. Okay, so there's your top. Now, I spread glue. I took an old scraper blade, and I cut notches in it. And when you're doing this, you've got to be quick. In fact, if you're doing it by yourself, I suggest you only do one layer at a time. But if you've got a hand, you can spread glue over all that surface, put the piece on, spread glue over the next piece, put the piece on. And now, if you can afford it, go buy another sheet or have already bought another sheet and cut some more pieces. Because the more pieces you can add to that, we call them cauls. A clamp, when I put a clamp on this and clamp it like that, the pressure from the clamp is going to go out at about 45 degrees. So the more cauls or the more material I have on top of that, the farther out the pressure from that clamp. Now, it'll be decreased pounds per square inch, but the effect of the clamp will be stretched out over a much wider area. So I can get away with, if I had cauls that were up to maybe here, 3 more layers, I'd have one clamp here, one here, one here, 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 here. Might get away with a dozen clamps. You got to spend some money on a few things, and that would be it. If you want to reach across the middle, you can simply take a strip of wood, about 1/4 of an inch thick, thin strip, and lay it down there, and then take some pieces of 2x4 that have straight edges, and set a piece of 2x4 here, and one here, and one here. And now when you clamp the piece of 2x4, by the time it pulls tight here, the pressure it's applying because of that 1/4 inch strip is going to put a lot of pressure in the middle. You're going to clamp to the underside of these stretchers, so that acts as your big caul on the bottom, but it also acts as your base in keeping this thing nice and flat. It really works, and it works extremely well. Once the glue is dry, there's no way you're ever going to keep these things in perfect alignment. They're going to creep a little bit. Now, one of the things that Luther idea that he read about was after you put your glue on, just take a salt shaker and lightly spread salt all over there. What the salt will do, it acts like a grit, and it'll help hold the pieces from moving, but it'll eventually dissolve as well. My own jury's out on that still, or still debating whether or not that is a help or a hindrance, because we had a problem with some of the ones we just did where the gap didn't close. And I think we may have had either too coarse a salt or too much salt, because we kind of had a little homemade salt shaker. But I think if it's done lightly, it's just enough to keep it from creeping, but it will dissolve and still allow the glue to set up, and you'll end up with an homogeneous 3-inch thick piece of MDF. If you can't access, that was our salt shaker. So, a little bit like that, and you had way too much salt, and I think we may have had too much in one area that it didn't allow it to close. If you can't get 1-inch MDF, you can go out and you can buy 3/4. The only difference is you're going to have 3 glue joints instead of 2. And the fact that you can get 1 inch just makes it that much easier to do.
You'd need 2 sheets of 3/4.
Did we do?
Get the cutting wheel, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So someone actually
Yeah.
also asked, would 1/2-inch MDF still work if we have some extra on hand, considering we stack to the same top thicknesses, or is 1-inch critical for flatness?
Well, the thicker it is, the flatter it's going to tend to be, I would think. I don't think I'd want to do it with 1/2 inch. That's just too much. That's 6 pieces, 5 glue joints. The nice thing about this stuff is it's big enough and heavy enough that it'll hold its shape. I think 1/2 inch would be too flimsy. I mean, I used to do them at a 3/4. I much prefer doing 1 inch. I'd go thicker than that, but this stuff is a bear to try to move around. You get a sheet of this, it weighs a ton. And your arms are stretched out. It's just too hard to handle. So once that's done, then you just got to trim it all off. And if you want, it's hard to move this. When this thing is all glued up, this is a big chunk. You can use a flush trim bit on a router, and you can run off of one side and go all the way around. Actually, you can make have one piece a little bit smaller than the rest, and hopefully it will stay inside of the wider pieces. And then you can use your flush trim bit to reference off of the face of the thin, small piece and trim the rest of it. Anyway, all those ideas are going to be in the video.
All right.
I'm just trying to give you a bit of an overview. Yep, question?
Yeah, we got a few. Paul asked, can you use...
Paul who?
Paul Humphrey asked,
Hi, Paul.
Can you use hide glue to allow more time?
Hide glue?
Yeah.
No experience at all with hide glue, Paul. I have used boat glue, which is a 2-part water and powder. Gives you about an hour's open time. But then it's just such a pain to work with that stuff. We use the tight bond. If you've got one other person helping you, you can spread it, get the second piece on there, spread the glue on that one, get the third piece on there, and clamp it up. But I've got a lot of experience. We've built at least 30 of these benches. If you're working by yourself, as I said, you might want to just do one at a time. So glue this piece, but treat it as if you're gluing the whole thing. Once the glue is set, take it all apart, glue the second piece, and do it. That's probably a smart move for the first time you're doing this.
11 Bravo 2P asks, what about dowels for indexing?
Well, it's just, so all the dowels do is provide the indexing, nothing for strength. I'll tell you what we do. I neglected to tell you this, is we can put pipe clamps. Pipe clamps, see the pipe clamp will cover both joints on one end and on the other. And you can hold it in place and keep it from moving this way. But we still had it move sideways on us a little bit. And it gets a little bit of a mess when you got so many clamps around there. But would I want to put dowels down through? The only problem with that is you add a little bit of extra friction. If you didn't glue them, you'd be okay. You could do that, but then you got to line them up. You don't want them showing up on the top side. Yeah, I mean, it would work, but the salt idea is a good idea, because I think when we did that, we had very little movement. You're going to figure, there's no way you're going to put the joint together and have it perfectly flush. So you're going to have to deal with a little bit of it, but it's not hard. Meaning it's not hard to deal with after the fact. I stand those on their edge, and I use a belt sander to smooth them up after I've run them over the table saw. Yes, Jim?
What about biscuits?
Same thing. Yeah, I'm trying to, none of these things are making it any stronger. They're all for the convenience of keeping these pieces from sliding around. So if that's all they're trying to do, I want the very simplest. And the simplest is the salt and a clamp that covers both ends. But it seems to me the first time we did them with the salt, we didn't use anything. We just lined them up, put a little bit of salt on there, put them together, lined them up, and then put the clamps on them, and I don't think they crept at all. It's worth experimenting with. But don't use too much salt. Just sprinkle it lightly. And don't be scrimpy on the glue either. Make sure you've got a good even coat. That notch trowel that I made leaves a pretty even coat. And the reason why the notch trowel is, it's going to give you a measured amount, but you can take that thing and you can, you've got a big puddle of glue in here, and you can use that to move it all around, and it's actually not very messy, and it's quite fast. Yeah? Yeah, Ken?
Bill Tiffin says, could you top it with a 1/4-inch hardboard pin nailed and then replace it when needed?
Yeah, I've had people talk about trimming it with hardwood, putting a piece of something on top. Again, the idea on this was, how can I have a bench with the least amount of expense and as quickly as possible? This is a weekend project. So I want it to get to a point where it is a useful bench. So I don't want to add a whole bunch of superfluous stuff, although I have since. But would I go in and do that? If you went out here, and we can't because Jake's cord isn't long enough, but if you went in and looked at those bench tops, there's some dings in them, but there's nothing that makes any of them unusable. And if it's your own bench, you're going to take better care of it than strangers would. So it really is not, it's a whole lot more durable than you probably think, and all of these imaginary problems that you're coming up with really don't exist. So I wouldn't bother. And I wouldn't bother capping it with hardwood either. You don't need it. You don't need it.
Tony wants to know, when doing the glue up, are you gluing one surface and then doing a rub joint, or gluing both surfaces?
Well, we've done 30 of them, so we now do both surfaces. We glue it, put it in place, glue the next one, put it in place, clamp it up. But we had 3 or 4 hands. If I was doing this by myself for the first time, I would do one layer, glue it, put the second one on top, clamp it all up with the cauls on there, wait for that to dry, then take it apart, glue the second one, put it on there, and just now you're not trying to manage a drying glue joint while you're putting the second one on. Just a whole lot easier. So do one at a time he's the least bit nervous about it. Ken?
Yaya Ishmael, how well does the MDF hold up to hold fast for bench dogs, I guess?
Is that a med?
It's I think he's a relative. Same last name, but it's not a med. They're both in here.
Yeah, is
He
a
said
med
like-
there?
he
A
said
med's
he-
here.
he said he-
Okay, I got to show you something. Stop right there. Look at this. So Ahmed, my friend, who's coming with John, his friend, to the October workshop, Ahmed sent me these the other day. This is awesome. Handles for my IBC chisels. Vera wood, which will turn green. Cocobolo, isn't that pretty? Jake, do you remember that one? No, not African blackwood. Was that African blackwood? African blackwood. Kingwood. Ahmed, tell me if I hit one.
You keep moving your hand into the camera.
Oh, sorry. Kingwood, which is some of the prettiest kingwood I've seen. This is black and white ebony. Gorgeous stuff. This, my favorite, is snakewood. This one is Indonesian,
I think Malaysian.
Malaysian rosewood,
Blackwood.
African blackwood.
No,
No?
that's Madagascar rose.
Madagascar rosewood? Glad you memorized them all. This is for a Lee Nielsen handle. This is pink ivory. And then we've got some more out. Actually, Ahmed, we only picked up half at a time. We've got the other half to pick up next time we're down there. Thank you very much, by the way. They were awesome.
So
So the question was,
and it's from his nephew, by the way.
his nephew?
Go ahead, Ken.
So the question was, does the MDF give way under pressure from the bench dogs when you're clamping?
No. No, I mean, that's the so the disadvantage of MDF is in
Give an example of what he's asking. Pick something in advice.
well, I'm assuming that if you clamp something in that doesn't. If you clamp something in the vise, I mean, solid as a rock, nothing's going to happen. By the way, most people put way too much pressure on that vise, but no, nothing moves. So the disadvantage of MDF, in small pieces, it's not very strong. In big, thick pieces like this, it's super strong. Now, my bench holes, we need to talk about that too. So your bench holes have to be properly spaced. I probably wouldn't put them much closer than that. And just to tell you, these are on 3-inch centers. So right up here, I have them on 3. What?
It should have been 3-inch centers a lot further than you did.
Yeah. Well, we had hundreds of a lot of these things that get built. In fact, I stopped in the class that we teach. We use our longest piece of wood that we use is 24 inches. So I should have taken these all the way down. I didn't do it, but we can go back and do it easy enough.
When they build it, it should be on 3-inch centers.
Yeah, I would probably have stayed 3-inch centers probably back to about here, because you'll notice how far away I was. You know, in order to clamp that piece in place, I had to have a great big gap here. So if I'd had a 3-inch center, I'd have been a lot closer to there when it came tight instead of way out here.
The question actually was about a hold fast, which is the
Oh, the hold fast. Now, I don't use the hold fast, and I don't know how bad it's going to beat them up, but I'll tell you what I do. After you've drilled your hole, this is a 1-inch hole. This is the Shoberg bench dog, which I like the aluminum ones, not the steel ones. You hit this with your plane. You're not going to destroy your plane. This will give first. It requires a 1-inch hole. I bore the hole, and then I use a quarter-round bit, a 3/16 quarter-round bit, because MDF is, if you leave a sharp edge like that on MDF, it's going to get damaged quite easily. Quarter-round it like that, and it's less likely. And then I go in and I'll saturate that top inch or so with the cyanacrylate to really stiffen that up, make it hard. If I was going to want to use one of these with a hold down, I would probably go in there and I would soak that whole thing really well with the cyanacrylate to make it as stiff as possible. But I don't use a hold fast, so I can't tell you how it would react that way. Sorry.
We have a donation from William Edis for $100.
Thank you, William. Appreciate it. Dave? Big thank you from your side. Thank you. Okay, question?
What about topping it with hardboard?
You know, if it's not glued to it, then you always have that. What's the word I'm reaching for, Ken?
Flexibility.
Well, you know, when I'm working on my bench and I'm holding something and I'm chiseling it, I want it to be rock solid. So I don't want anything giving underneath. So if you're putting hardboard on and gluing it on to avoid that, well, then how are you going to take it off if you destroy it? So that's why I don't do that. I just leave it right like this. And as I was mentioning, I don't know if I said this, but if I had bored those holes so that they were perpendicular to the face, I could easily have flipped this thing over and used the other side when the top side got beat up. But that doesn't get beat up that often. In fact, we have not had to replace any of those bench tops yet. Okay, all right, let's keep going. So we've got the top done. It's all glued up. We've got the base all done. Let's talk about the vise, because this is the part that you're going to say, I don't want to spend $250 on. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, if you scrimp, you're going to pay for it. That didn't make sense, or that didn't sound like it made sense, but it does. If you scrimp on your bench, on your vise, you will pay for it every time you use it, and you will curse it. So this is the Shoberg adjustable vise. We carry them on our site. You can bid them through Woodcraft, or whether they're back ordered in the Woodcraft, so we still have some. Tell me that isn't an advantage. Here's what you get. There's no vise jaw. You got to make that yourself. I actually did a review of this on one of the YouTubes. The Biggle, I don't know how I end up with that, but the biggest single, that was I was trying to put two words together. Advantage to this is the fact that they use rectangular tubes instead of round tubes. So with the rectangular tubes, you have a piece of, what do I call this stuff?
You call it phenolic.
Yeah, it's some kind of a composite, but it's slippery. You've got a piece over here, and you've got a piece over here. Then you've got a steel bar right here, and you've got two set screws with locking nuts on them. So what you're able to do is loosen that locking nut and squeeze this over so that you take all the racking out. Now, in case you don't understand what I mean, racking is when you clamp something in the vise, and because of the way this style of a vise works, the more you tighten, the more it twists this way and leaves this side loose and this side tight. And the natural tendency when it's loose is they tighten it even more. Well, all that does is create even more racking and make this side even more loose. So what I've done here is used a big heavy jaw so that when you put that in there, that'll tighten all the way across and it holds it nice and firmly. If you tighten up those set screws, you can take almost all that racking out and it'll perform extremely well. This is the best commercially available vise that I have ever seen. Easy to install. That's the big feature. To install it, there's two little tabs. So you turn it over like this on the back, on the underside of your bench. And what I did is I get it in position with the jaw in there, so it's holding it something like that. Give it a good whack right here, and that's going to leave a small dent because you have to bore a hole right here, not very deep, to allow for this nut, which sticks up above these two mounting flanges. Then, with it still in position, I take my steel hammer and I give it a whack right there and right there. There are two little tabs that resist the effort that when you're winding this in, there's a lot of pull on it. And I cut two little slots, 1/8-inch slots, with a router and a straight bit. You could carve them if you had to, that these little tabs drop down into. Once you've got them in place, I tighten it up, pulling against these tabs, and then I go in and I bore 4 pilot holes on each side, and I use 5/16. Where are they, Jake? I had them right here. On the floor? Oh, tell me they're right here. I just had them the other day. There they are. Now these are 2.5 inches long. Yep. So, and that's a 5/16 leg, and that's not. It's a 1/4 inch. It is a 1/4. 1, 2, 3, 4 on each side. The whole operation probably took 15 minutes, and then that's mounted. Now, it's on this part. The way I've designed this bench is this section overhangs the base by enough in order to mount that underneath and not have any obstruction.
Couple questions real quick.
Yeah.
What is the jaw made out of?
The jaw? Well, you mean the vise
The Vise jaw.
face. So mine is a piece of maple, but you could use anything you want. And if it's a softer wood, you may have to compensate by making it a little bit thicker. And when you cut this, a few things that you have to do. You have to cut around. So if you look over here, you stay there, Jake. I'll bring this over.
While you're walking, Nick Brown bought a T-shirt,
Thank you, Nick.
and it's 6 minutes past.
And what?
10. So
Megan wants to go home.
And it's 6 minutes back? Oh, you mean you're tired?
It's over an hour.
Yeah, Nick's coming to our class. Nick's the local. Okay, so when you fit your jaw onto this, you want it to sit here, so you've got to cut a notch for this. You got to cut a notch for this. You got to cut a notch for this. You're going to have to round this corner so it'll fit down in here. And you also are going to have to round where you've cut the notches to get over here. There's a weld in there, so you've got to round that over too. And there's a weld on either side of there. You got to make sure that your wooden jaw sits nice and flat here and here and here and up against this. So there's 8 bolts or 8 screws that hold that in place. Easy. It's not hard. Not hard at all.
So if you only had one vise, would you put it on the end or the side?
Well, when we very first built these, we put one vise here as a face vise and one vise down here as a tail vise. Well, that meant you had to go in and you had to cut through that stretcher to allow, because that vise has to go way in there. Plus, it doubled the price because now instead of $250, you're spending $500 on vices. And we thought, you know what? Why can't you cut dovetails down here? That's all we're using the face vise for. Well, you can. You can cut dovetails down here, and you can use it to hold your pieces in place that you're planing. So we did away with having a face vise, and we just used the tail vise. So that one vise will do everything you need. If you don't mind spending the money, you can add one over here. But be prepared to have to cut through that stretcher, and you want to do some planning beforehand, or else you're going to end up cutting through the staples, and that'll ruin your bits real quick.
Do you foresee any sag or overhang down the road?
Okay, good question. So here's what I do to avoid that. When we bolt these in place, we have 4 lag bolts, one on either end, one here, and one there. So when you bolt this to that, you're essentially having all this material to prevent this thing from sagging. And no, we have not had an issue. You fire your questions faster, or else I'm going to keep going.
No, keep going for now.
Okay. So what we've done since, we've added this tool tray underneath because our guys are here. They've got all their tools. And this is a relatively small bench. Well, it's just a shelf, just a place to store your tools. This is our sharpening station over here. If you follow if you like my style of sharpening, I use that low bench, that low tray. So my stones are sitting on here. What did we cut here, Dave? 3 degree slope, 2 degree slope on this block of wood underneath, so that all of your slurry is running away from your bench. I'd actually line that with something just up in here, just to keep it off of there, keep the mess from being all over the end of your bench. Okay, so we've got I told you how we attach the bench. I cord around everything just so that it's a little bit easier on the hands. Oh, Baltic birch is terrible when it comes to splinters. You definitely have to cord around that, or else you're going to look like a porcupine. Yeah, and a little bit of sanding, and I put a finish on. I spray it, and it just helps to keep it clean. Why not? So we've got it attached. We've mounted our vise. We've drilled for our dog holes. Bench lamp, really critical. You've got to be able to see. So, and by the way, if you notice, we put 2 rows of bench dogs on this. We don't normally do this, but this is built so that either left hand or right hand can use it. So if you're right hand, you're planing this way. If you're left hand, you're going to be planing this way. You can cut dovetails either way, it doesn't matter. So normally, because if I'm right-handed using this, I'm never using that dog strip out there. I'm only using this one. But like I said, this can be used left hand, right hand.
So the gentleman who asked, it's Campbell MJ, the guy who asked the question about the sag.
Yeah.
He was actually asking about the Vise end sag.
No, I haven't had any problem. I mean, how many years in are we? No, when was the first time we built one of these?
Would have been
No, because it was when we did we started the power tool workshop in January of 2012. Frick?
11.
No,
Oh,
that
the
was a
power,
hand tool.
power tool, yeah, 12.
So and this was the first thing we built, so we haven't had a problem. So I don't expect a problem. Haven't had any sag.
We just had a donation from Michael Byrne
For
for $250.
thank you, Michael. Thank you. We appreciate that. We'll put it to good use. Okay, bench lamp. Because this is what brought up the double dog hole strip. If you're right-handed or left-handed, you're only doing one strip of dog holes. I drilled another hole on the other side over here, and we're going to start selling these. But the weak link on this vise, on this bench lamp is this thing. If you drill a half-inch hole and put that in there, it's going to eat that half-inch hole, and this ends up getting broken. So we turn this little mushroom just to give it some strength, and then using the same 1-inch hole. And I drilled a hole right about here that you can set your bench lamp into, and it'll reach out around, and you get everywhere you need.
the mushroom pivots.
Yes, the mushroom pivots. Thank you, Jake. Instead of this fragile piece pivoting inside that half-inch hole, it's the 1-inch mushroom that pivots inside the bench dog hole. Okay, a couple more things I want to throw at you. Lag bolts, no big deal there. That's what's holding it, the bench top to the base. Stove bolts, no big deal there. You do want to cut big enough holes inside so that when you put a washer on there, you can actually get it in there and it doesn't have to bend too much or conform to the inside of that circle. The bigger the hole, the closer to being flat that is. I told you about the sharpening station. I told you about the tool tray underneath. The last thing I want to talk to you about is I really like having a tool tray. So on the back of my bench, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, I have a tool tray. I'd much rather have, it looks like a dump, right? But I'd much rather have stuff being dropped in here than being dropped on the floor.
Can I, just before you move to
Yeah.
the tool tray?
Yeah.
One more question about the dog holes.
Okay.
Shoot, where did it go? 3/4 or 1 inch?
Are you asking me? Are they 3/4 or 1 inch?
Yeah, that one. There was another one too, but answer that one first.
These are 1 inch. These are Shoberg bench dogs, and they are a 1 inch diameter hole.
Oh, the other one was
Which is odd because everything else about this thing is metric.
how far in from the edge of the bench did you place the dog holes? That's from Tim.
Okay, that's a good question because you've got to be able to clear the stretchers underneath. You don't want to
Wait, how far in from which end?
Just
from the edge. He said the edge.
from the edge.
Here. So mine are 1 3/4 inch centered. You're doing most of your work right here. People always say, and this bench is 20 inches wide. Well, 20 inches is a wide bench. You're not going to be able to plane over here very effectively. So most of your work is probably going to be done within 12 inches of this edge. So I put my bench dogs right here close. If I'm planing something on its edge and I need to have it clamped in place, I'd much rather have it there than sitting over there. So it's nice and close and handy to me. And you got to make sure you have to be aware that you don't put this together so that you look down the hole and you see part of the hole obstructed by the stretcher, because then your bench dog's not going to fit in. So you got to be far enough away. You also have to take that into account where you have your trestle. You got to have that in between, Jake. So that's the reason why we weren't. That's probably the reason why we didn't continue the 3-inch spacing. We had to allow for that. Okay. Two more things. We have. I'll just grab one real quick and show you what I mean. We often have people that are tall come to the class. So rather than build a tall bench that isn't suitable for everybody, we do a normal size bench, which, by the way, Nobody's asked, but I'll tell you. The height of these, 34.5 inches. And then we just whip these up real quick, and they slide right on underneath, and that gives you an extra 4 inches in height. So we've got a bunch of these. Our class next week, we've got a bunch of tall guys. And then we got Charlie coming the week after, and I think Charlie's over 6'8". So Charlie, we have to have 2 of those on there for you. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is the tool tray. And here's, neither of these fit any of our benches because this was on some of the very early benches that we made that we've since sold. But whatever thing you want to come up with, ingenious way, gives you a chance to show off your dovetails a little bit. So this would fit on the back side. Now this is modified after the fact, remember. So if I pull this out from the edge, I would have that sitting somewhere like that and just screwed from the underside, the plywood into the MDF. But this one is too long for this bench. I actually have a little ramp in there because it makes it easier to clean. So you'd be like that, and then you can clean it out easy enough and acts as a catch-all. Anything else?
I don't know if you said this yet. This guy tuned in late, but he said, what was used to drill the bench dog holes? It was a drill?
Yeah. You can't find these at your normal hardware store. So you're going to have to go to a specialty woodworking store. But this is just a great big 1-inch diameter brad point. It's got to be good and sharp. It takes a lot of torque. Now this is turned down to a 3/8 shaft. So you can put it in a normal drill. I kind of wish they had, had the 3 flats on there because you can see that scored. A lot of torque. We've used this a lot, but you're drilling down through that 3 inches MDF. There's a lot of friction on there. But it's 55? Yeah. Yeah, they're not cheap. I guess the $100 bench is really starting to get expensive.
Well,
You'll use it on other stuff.
would it be worthwhile to do a 3/4?
I don't know. I've never used 3/4 bench dogs, but I mean, I want good bench dogs. I don't think there's any reason why 1 inch would be superior to 3/4 inch when it comes to this. If you could get ones that are, like I said, have that angled face on there, and then they've got a nice spring on the side that keeps it in position wherever you put it.
Rob, how do you maintain an angle when you're drilling?
Now, what we did is we, it's right down there, Dave. Remember, we were doing a whole whack of these. So we went in, we tilted the table on the drill press at 3 degrees, and we made a guide out of 3 pieces of 1-inch MDF, and we made it so we could use it on both sides. So we clamped that in place. We clamp a piece underneath here to prevent it from blowing out at the bottom, and just drill down through this using this as a guide. And then if you're doing the opposite side, which is your for the lefties, we flip it around like that. So if all you need to do is just get a block of wood that you drill 1 hole through. Remember, you don't need to do what we did. You don't need to be on 3 degrees because that's already compensated for on the bench dog. So just on your drill press, get a block of anything, drill a 1-inch hole on it, and just keep moving it along and using that as your guide to drill down through.